Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming to Pop Madness 2021. For those of you who have come before, you may notice we are slightly different this year because we are all virtual. So thank you for joining us in this new technology. We're enjoying it, but we're still hoping next year to be able to do it in person. So fingers crossed on that. Thank you for coming today specifically to this Fandom During the Pandemic panel. I will be talking with our lovely guests, who I'll introduce in just a moment, but I have really relied on Fandom for the last year to survive through all the craziness we've been dealing with, and to be honest, relied on it a lot to deal with life before the pandemic. So I'm so glad that everybody was able to join us today to talk about this. I'll start out, Lynn Zabernis is with us. Dr. Zabernis, you are a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University. And I know you most through the Supernatural fandom and your Fangasm website. Melissa Lowry, you are with Sid City, who runs the Sid City Social Hour, and also do like Nice Girls TV and other popular websites. Melissa Gonzalez, you're here with us, our local geek girl and Alamo City Browncoat. And we were going to talk a little bit about some of your monthly meetings and things like that. And Rachel Miner, you are with us from Random Acts, which is a charity that is improving the world one random act of kindness at a time. And then I'll talk a little bit about sort of an offshoot, or as you were saying, a cousin of that, which is the Gish virtual scavenger hunts, which have, at least personally, have been a huge bonus to me because I've been doing all the little hunts that we've been doing during the lockdowns. So thank you again for coming, and thank you for being here with us. And I was just going to start out by saying, like I said, Fandom has been a big tool for me to survive the last year. And Lynn, when I called to ask if you would do this panel, you literally, your first words were, "I just wrote an article on this."
I know it was, I mean, it's not weird, I think, because I think for a lot of people, the pandemic has been such a stressful time and just constant change, and everything that's familiar to us has been yanked out from under us. So I had just written an article for Psychology Today about fandom in the pandemic, because that's my research area. I'm a clinical psychologist, but my primary area of research is fandom and why it is healthy and how it can be beneficial. And I think it's probably been more beneficial than ever during the pandemic. And there's a couple reasons why. I mean, one of them is that we're very isolated during the pandemic. So we're kind of cut off from the familiar coping strategies and the familiar people that we're used to having around us and, make us feel like we belong. So we actually are attached also to our favorite fictional characters. And when we watch those characters and we immerse ourselves in those fictional worlds, that's another kind of connection. And it goes back to our attachment relationships. We feel good when we're with familiar people who we care about. The brain doesn't make a whole lot of distinction between those people we love in real life and those really beloved fictional characters. Not that we can't tell the difference, where nobody is delusional, but it brings some of those same benefits. So fandom's been really important during the pandemic.
Definitely. And Mel, I know you've been running Sid City for a while, and in case people don't know, Alexander Siddick is the Sid that we're referring to.
Right.
I always feel a bit odd if you haven't met the person personally, but everybody calls him by a nickname, and you're like, do I call him? What do you call him? But the thing that I've really found fun, and I haven't been able to join too much live, but I've been watching the reruns because I work when you're running them, are the Sid City Social Hours. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually Sid City Social Club.
Social Club.
We like to have our, the FCSC. Yeah, so we started this back in April of 2020. It was, Sid wanted to reach out to the fans in a way that would give them a space to talk about what was going on, because as Lynn was saying, we're so isolated right now. He was really concerned about what that might be doing to people's mental health. And so we figured out a way to get a group of people together. We do it twice a week, Tuesday evenings and Friday afternoons in the US time. And we've got, 100 people at each event. We have a cap on it to keep it a little more intimate. And it's really just been Sid talking to fans and asking them, you know, how are you doing? How are you coping? What's it like where you are? And then that has evolved into learning about people's interests and skills and talents. And I mean, we've had some fascinating, really every single person is just fascinating. It's
Well,
been amazing.
and it started out with the talking, but I've also noticed like you were doing a live reading, dramatic reading of Alone Together, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken. And
we've produced several episodes of fan fiction, just table reads, essentially, you know, kind of just a glorified table read. There's a little bit of production value, but not much because we don't want to anger the powers that be. Because it is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. For those who aren't familiar with who Sid played, he was Dr. Bashir on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and we've done several fan fiction scripts, and we've been able to bring several other cast members from DS9 on, as well as Sid's son Django. He cameoed in a couple of productions, so that's been really cool to see, and I think for the authors too, to see their words come to life in that way.
I was actually talking, we had a panel yesterday with about fan fiction 101 and talking about that a bit. And we were saying that fan fiction right now is just through the roof because people have time to read and time to write. So it's become very popular at the moment and a great outlet for stress, and both reading and writing it being a very good outlet. Melissa, and how I ended up with two Melissas on the same panel, that was bad planning on my part. I do apologize. Melissa Gonzalez, with the Brown Coats, you're still doing a monthly meeting, your meet and geek.
Yes, ma'am.
And how's that been going?
It's been a learning curve for I think a lot of my members. It's been a kind of hit or miss situation since it started, trying to find a happy medium for everybody to participate online. As a gamer, and we have several gamers in our family, we were used to using online venues to communicate with each other through, for gaming. So I thought, oh, we'll just stick with that and I'll bring everybody else in. And it's not always the easiest transition, but we still have stuck with it. I mean, for a while there, we were even trying to do something crazy and watch, an episode every 2 weeks with the group. And then I started to realize, I was like, wait, there's only so many episodes. We're going to run out real fast. So we've gone back to our usual routine of every last Sunday of the month, we get together, which tonight or this afternoon will be our next one. And we just hang out. I mean, I say we try and watch an episode, but for the most part, it's been mostly just to reconnect with each other, check how everybody's doing, how is everybody's mental health in this situation, what has been the challenge over the last couple of weeks that you've had to face, or just to rant and rave about random things, that they went to the grocery store and couldn't find milk, or that their local theater will actually make a delivery of popcorn. And it was for Wonder Woman, I think, actually. One of our members is in the Shirts Cibolo area, and one of the theaters out there literally delivered to your front door the Wonder Woman bucket full of popcorn and the collector's cups, and she got it on Christmas Day. And I was like, that's kind of cool, because I miss the movies. I miss going to a movie theater so much.
Yes.
But yeah, and we haven't done as much charity work in this last year because it's been sort of difficult to figure out a way to do it and still make it fun for those that are donating to the charity. But I have some ideas. I have a lot of ideas. I just got to make them happen. I want to do a radio drama is what I want to do. I want to do a reading of the novels.
Oh, excellent.
And I'm like, okay, we got to do this.
There's a new graphic novel coming out soon, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably. The comic books have continued for a couple of years now. But they started publishing a series of novels. And I have them all, and I'm like, I need to get around to reading these, not just having them look pretty on my desk. But I thought, when I discussed with some of the other brown coat groups what they were doing to try and continue the Can't Stop Serenity charity, a lot of them were still trying to host screenings, if safely and whatnot. And I told them, I said, I kind of think a like a reading or like a radio drama kind of type.
Whoop. I think we have a freeze up. We were talking about some of the joys of technology. While we're waiting for that to unfreeze, I'm going to go ahead and talk to Rachel for a minute. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
For anybody that doesn't know, Rachel's joining us as the executive director of Random Acts, which is a charity that is improving the world one random act at a time. One random act of kindness at a time. A lot of people know, obviously, through Supernatural. You've been on tons of stuff like Bully and
it's okay. They don't need my resume. So but the most important thing is I feel like this has been such a crucial time for fandom, for community that need to connect, and I found actually charity to kind of to be one of the most healing things, and it's been a source of so much joy and healing for a lot of us. I mean, there's 149 people on the staff, the most amazing people, and we're all going through the variety of different trials and losing people we love and all the and I spoke to the staff about being able to take time off if they needed, but most of us have actually craved throwing ourselves into this work more. And I think that's something that a message that I'd like to get out to people is that it's actually been one of the most uplifting things. And I found that with supporters too, is I thought maybe people weren't going to be able to donate because they're going through their own trials or they can't get involved in campaigns, but it's been the reverse, which is, I think, from the get-go, most of us wanted to be able to channel that energy towards something that felt like we were making other people's lives better, and it helps to make ours feel better. So it's actually been one of the most dynamic times within charity work, within this fandom, of just people wanting to have that connection community and that sense that we can help. So we've done programs that are specifically, we did a COVID program where we were finding the most active, most helpful organizations within communities all over the world, and then funding those, and people were able to nominate so we could all get involved and help to generate a lot of positive energy and in terms of helping people. And we did the Serving Hope campaign where we partnered with the inaugural committee, which was very exciting, and had people helping to serve food to people all over the world. And it just, there's so many ways we can get involved. Right now we're starting to focus on food equity. And so we're focusing on urban farms and organizations that are helping to bring food to people, because it's such a difficult circumstance for so many. But the idea is, I think we're all in this together, we're all going through this, but there's such a diversity of needs. But there's something really comforting about being able to connect and know you're not alone in what you're going through. And I think that's the same place that fandom fills for most of us, is that sense that we can reach out across maybe barriers and connect to each other and find our similarities and support each other through this.
Yeah.
So
that's great to hear that there's been a lot of involvement, and Random Acts has done so many things. You've been going for about 10 years now, I believe. Last year was the 10-year anniversary.
That's right.
That's awesome. That alone is awesome. But I mean, it's everything from, like you said, sort of big scale to, at the beginning of the pandemic, I know a lot of people were sewing masks for healthcare workers.
Yeah.
Recently, people were, and Random Acts sort of funds these little things that people do in their own communities as well, like giving Valentine's Day cards to service workers. And so just lots of really cool stuff like that.
Yeah, and there is no such thing as a small act, because you can change an entire person's world just by showing them that they matter and that kindness exists in the world. And I think it's so easy for us to forget that, because there are so many problems and injustices, and just to remind each other, like, no, there's someone who cares about you. I think you're valuable in this world. And so I think, especially in this time, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, the small gestures have been some of the things that got me through. Like, I know I lost my father at the beginning of this time, and it was one of the hardest, darkest periods because, you know, everything going on with the pandemic, and then he got sick, and I had friends who would do things like just send me a message with an emoji heart. And it seems like such a little thing, but that was exactly what I needed. And I couldn't take anymore. Like if they tried a big message, I probably couldn't have read it, but just like just little reminders. Or I love when people do chalk drawings, like when you go outside and see, you've seen someone is sending you a message of, hey, I see, you know, like I'm out here too.
It's not
and
all
I think
dark and depressing.
that's right. And I think that that's what fandom feels too. I think we all need those, just that sense of, hey, there's, you know, things, these little joys matter, and we can share them with other people.
There's actually a lot of research that shows too that when we do help other people, that is actually the best way to make ourselves feel better. Kind of
Yes.
relieves that sense of helplessness, and it gives us an endorphin rush. I mean, it's really good for you. I often my last two books, which Rachel actually wrote a chapter in one, benefit Random Acts and a suicide prevention charity also. And people don't often realize that. So when I bring the books like to sell at a convention or something, I always say when somebody buys a book, and thank you with every, you know, by buying this book, you're contributing to the important works. And I talk, and they're like, I am? And I think that's actually the most, not that the books aren't meaningful, because I think the messages in them from the actors and the fans are very meaningful, but in some way, I think that's the thing that makes people happiest, because that's not why they were getting it. So they didn't realize that they were making that contribution, but it's good for us.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I definitely have found that, you know, for myself as well, is, you know, when I've had a chance to maybe, you know, take time off, or do I need, this is the most uplifting, joyous thing in my life. So I'm like, no, I want to do this more. So.
And just referring to that, because I totally agree, but even pre-pandemic, Lynn, your first book of yours I read was called Fangasm. And it was just so nice hearing sort of, you're not the only person that thinks like fandom is a big part of your life, and it's okay to be sort of obsessed with it, and, you know, have it be a big part of how you feel every day. Because Rachel, like you were saying, one of the things that cheers me up the most is you'll post these little quotes and sort of uplifting sayings and stuff, and it's just like, okay, I can handle the rest. You know, so it's just great to see those little simple things. And Mel, it's just wonderful too, like knowing that Sid is so concerned about how his fans are being affected, that he's willing to take the time and meet with them and talk with them. And so not only is the fandom itself great, but you're sort of getting the approval that your objects of fandom are saying, hey, we're having trouble too. You know, we're in it with you. In fact,
yeah, he said that more than once, where he said, you know, I'm getting as much out of this as you guys, if not more, when he's talking to everybody, because he's been stuck at home. He just got a job and left this a couple of days ago, and he'll be away for a few weeks. So I'm running it.
Is he I saw, yeah. Is he still in the UK? Has he been dealing with it, or has he been over here?
He and his wife live in the US,
Okay.
but he's in Europe for a few weeks to film, and it's already only been a few days, and he's already missing. We were emailing yesterday, and he's already missing everybody, and because he really, you know, he's been stuck at home for a year, and this is, you know, interacting with fans has been a balm for him as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most important things too is it's a time where not only are we physically isolated from each other, but there's so many currents running through society that separate us, that like it's easier and easier to kind of fall into our bubbles, whether it's, you know, political, ideological, whatever it is, like, and to get more and more isolated from the rest of the world. And so I think fandom, one of the things that has always excited me about fandom is it's one of the few places where we connect with people outside of those bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's so healing for us personally and for the world, is just that, you know, we can connect with people. The Random X staff, we're from 17 countries. And, you know, we're all different socioeconomic backgrounds, all different, you know, just every ethnic, religious, like whatever backgrounds. And yet there is this feeling, you couldn't feel closer. when you're working with people in that way. And I think Fandom does that as well. And that diversity is so important. And I think it's necessary for us to, as human beings and as a world.
Be exposed. And the gish hunts, the mini scavenger hunts that people have been doing, there's a new one starting next weekend, and the theme of this one is wizards and weirdos. And I've just deliberately, a lot of the ones over the past year, I've joined teams with people I don't know, because I've just joined a team and met 9 new people that I never knew before, that are all across the globe, that all share sort of similar interests. And we've just been, chatting and doing, it's like, oh, cool, where are you from? Because it's so hard to meet people right now. I mean, yes, you kind of have, like you said, your little bubbles that you're used to, but it's nice to be able to meet new people and hear new ideas. And so it's been really great for that. And I think, and maybe I'm crazy, but a lot of my fandom friends, well, you don't know.
Yes, I do.
Some of us are proud of it. Some of my fandom friends seem to be coping so much better overall with the last year than sort of non-fandom friends, because they already have such a built-in support group that you can access anytime, and that you're sort of already used to, you're sharing your craziest ideas and desires and loves. And so it's already people that are used to you expressing yourself, and you're not real shy around.
Yeah.
And I think that's been so important. I know to me, I don't know if y'all have found.
It's absolutely, it's so healthy. And it's something that, to me, one of the things I keep working on, all of us are, at Random X are working on, is building community, because there's that sense of sometimes I'll need help and sometimes you'll need help, and it's not like a hierarchical looking down on savior type of thing. It's not and you don't need to be shamed for needing help. I would love that message to get out in the world. It's like every single human being needs help. We all need help. And the only way we're going to get through this or any other trying circumstance is if we form those communities where we're able to support each other through. And it doesn't, the roles are going to switch around all the time. And I think that Fandom is really good at that too. Is it's a safe space a lot of the time. To be vulnerable.
That's why I started researching it, because when I became a fan myself, I as a psychologist, I was like, oh, well, this is unusual that I'm suddenly so obsessed with this television show. What's going on? Like, is this okay? Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? And then I started to dig into the research, and a lot of it, this is 15 years ago when Supernatural began, so it's a while ago, but a lot of the research was so pathologizing. And what I was experiencing was this amazing community with very different norms. So people could be much more real and much more genuine and connect on a much more validating way, because they were being so real. So what I was seeing in my own real life was completely different than what I was seeing in the research, which is why I felt like, well, now I have to do my own research and publish my own books, because these other people have it wrong. And over the years, a lot more people are recognizing that and saying that, but that's been true about fandom for a long time. I think maybe people are going to realize it even more, because I think, Rhonda, you're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many people said to me when, the lockdowns began, well, you'll be all right. Your fandom is online and all over the world. You'll be, even my own children were like, Mom, we're not worried about you. You'll be fine.
I love it. And it's been interesting, even from a technological, like you're saying, you're already online. I am no tech whiz, as y'all seen this morning, trying to get things going with this. But a lot of fandom are, because so much is online. And, Mel, you've been running, websites and we met through a Lord of the Rings website, gosh, what, 20 years ago now or something ludicrous like that? How long was it?
Oh my gosh.
I know. And so that was one of my first forays into forums and fandoms online. And I actually got hooked up to it while I was living in England and met all these people across the world. And whenever I travel now, I've met people in probably 10 different countries that I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in your country. Let's meet up, in person. So it's so, there was already sort of a technological aspect that's helped, as well as the support.
No, it's so true, and that is one of the beautiful things because Random Acts was born from fandom, and you know, so there's so much of that similar aspect, and because we are global, we were already doing all of our meetings on Zoom and everything, so it was a convenient transition.
Yeah.
But I think one of my hopes, and leave it to me to try to find the positives of a pandemic. That's just my personality. But one of my hopes is that actually we all walk away from this more aware that like we're that acknowledgement that we all need help sometimes. I think for some people it's become that much more real, is that, you know, we in our society for some reason a lot of times we felt shame and we felt like we had to hide our, you know, our imperfections, even though we all have them. And it's something I noticed being disabled and traveling around. And Lynn, I saw you all the time, but I went around on a mobility scooter to conventions and things, and having something publicly, like visibly, not perfect about me from, that standard homogenized view of what we're supposed to all live and look like, made it comfortable for most people to talk about the fact that they were going through a hard time or going through things. And you know what? Every single person I ever talked to is. That's not like, it's an illusion that we're trying to sell to each other that like somehow we're fine. I don't need help. I'm all good. It's actually most of the time a lie. We all need help, and we all need community, we all need support. So I actually hope that the pandemic has made that more like more of a safe space for people and more real to people, that it's like we are all vulnerable, and that's okay.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
definitely.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that makes total sense. I mean, that's what I was trying to do with Family Don't End with Blood and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, by having the actors on the show also write chapters, because sometimes, as fans, we look at the actors and think, oh, they must have charmed lives and they can't relate to anything we're going through. And then Rachel, you wrote your chapter. Jared Padalecki wrote a chapter about being, depressed and having panic attacks and considering not going on. And people read something like that and think, oh, well, so it's not just me. Like, even these people who I look up to and I admire, they have struggled with the same things. And I think we all don't realize that often enough. But you're right. Maybe this pandemic is sort of the great equalizer in some ways, will help everybody realize this is a struggle we went through together as humanity.
Yeah. And to that note, we've talked before. Representation is so important to me, and I think that, speaking as fans, the things we're fans of, I would love to see more reflected in the art that we put into the world, of just the different, it being okay that we are all different and there's a diversity of different ways that is acceptable to live life. I think there was too much of a small, idea of what it was to be human, and I think a lot of times it was false. As I said, we genuinely, most of us are going through hard times in some way, shape, or form, and it would be much lovelier, I think, to have that reflected in our art too. So that's something I hope also comes out of this, that
Yeah.
we hear those stories more.
And just following on from that, even in the very immediate sense, here in Texas, and I know, Mel, like you're in Kansas, we've been dealing with the storm that came through last week. For example, we were supposed to have a sign language interpreter here, but unfortunately, because of some family problems they're dealing with, they weren't able to make it. But some of the actors and fandoms and all that have been helping, making sure people are okay, making sure people have food, sharing electricity if they have it. So that's another just, recent sort of reaffirmation of, you're not alone, and even, be it disabled or mental issues or whatever, somebody will check up on you. There's people that care if you're there and if you're okay.
Yeah.
And
And I feel like fandom is actually ahead of the curve on that again, where like also if you talk about fan fiction and stuff, you've got a lot of fan fiction that usually is more open to those stories and wants to see them. I know like I've been sent things of the I think it was Hell on Wheels. They took my demon character and put her in a wheelchair and wanted to see that as a story. You know, and just but that exists, those currents exist a lot within fandom. And I think a lot of people in fandom, you know, one of the reasons we turn to it is because we have our own you know, trials that we're going through. So
and that's one reason, Melissa, the last couple of years you've been with us in person to do this event. And when we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do it online? And, you know, I know a lot of big cons are online, but, you know, I know librarians can do anything, but
yes.
it's kind of new for us. And so I was able to call you up and be like, help, I need somebody to help me. And you're like, we can do this. I'll be there, whatever you need. So
Absolutely. And that's always been my thing with being involved in fandoms for the last, I mean, I've run Alamo City Browncoats for the last 15 years. And before that, I was part of, you know, several different groups. And I was always, I mean, I've done any kind of community outreach that I can do from the time I was in junior high. It was just ingrained in me in the way I was brought up. And then, you know, I always tell I work as a substitute high school teacher, well, before the pandemic, I would always tell my students, you know, it was weird because growing up, that was just normal for me, for my sisters, for our family. You volunteered. If there was something that needed help being done, you just stepped up and did it. That's how we were raised. And so it was kind of a natural progression. And I told him, I said, it wasn't until I became an adult and I graduated college that I realized, oh, wait, I actually selected a university that, like, that's one of the requirements for graduation is to do charity work. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. It becomes second thought, and, you know, it just becomes habit. You just do it. People ask for help and you can help, you help. And that's been, you know, my driving force with the Browncoats, with anything else I get involved with. So when I got the email and everybody was like, so when is this? In a couple of weeks? I was like, actually, it's next Sunday. So I was like, we got this. We got this. We can do this. I was like, I can hide all the mess real quick.
yeah.
By the way, I just want to put out there too that, like, for all of you, for anyone watching this, that Random Acts is such an amazing community. So one of the things we do as well is we fund acts of kindness. So you can, you know, fill out a form and just say, I have this idea for this act of kindness that I think would be really good in my community, or there's this great group that's doing this incredible work, and you could get funding for that. And so it enables us to have this like active community all over the world that is, I like the idea that it's not that top down, like we're going to come into your community and tell you what you need, and aren't we wonderful, we're helping. It's like, no, we're genuinely putting the question out there, what do you need? And you tell us. And so it's just something that I want everyone to know they can get involved in. And we also always have staff vacancies. And as I say, it's a really supportive community, because I think that, just like I've seen with a lot of the fandom communities, the idea with Random Acts is that if we create a really abnormally supportive, kind community where you just feel joyous doing the work and getting together with those people, that will then naturally flow out to be to help make the world kinder. Like I never wanted us to be, that's for me, I never want us to be an organization where we're like, go out and make the world kind, meanwhile we're like treating each other horribly. I think there's hypocrisy to that that's going to fall apart. But like, instead, isn't it wonderful if we create what, you know, in every one of these forums and all these things that you're doing, we're doing like this. I love this idea, and I love promoting reading too, because I'm a big book nerd. But just anything, like any excuse like this to create just healthy conversation and good community and messages of support and stuff, and let that flow out. And I really hope the world starts becoming more like that aspect of fandom.
We need more fandom in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I,
Um,
I think it's become more normal, I think, for people to be comfortable saying, oh, I read this. Have you checked this out? Because I know growing up, you know, as a kid in the 90s and in the 80s, I don't know what's going on with my internet connection today. It's been kind of wonky,
but we're here
but
for you.
uh, I'm like, okay, I need some sort of gnomes from Sims to come fix my internet connection.
I'll have somebody there in 10
yeah,
minutes.
I know, right? I think it's become easier for people to come out and say, I'm a fan of this and not feel like they're going to be pressured. I know growing up as a kid, I was told, you don't like Star Wars because that's for boys. You don't like Star Trek, that's for boys. Don't like wrestling, that's for boys. And those were the things I was like, you know what? You're telling me, no, I can't, I'm going to. It then transitions, like you're saying, Rachel, into something, trying to find a place where everyone is accepted, where you don't feel judged because you're a female, because you don't look like a certain, you know, type that society is telling you. I think that's always been a driving force for me, and that's part of the reason I started Brown Coats, not just because there wasn't a group already here, but because Brown Coats are such a diverse community to begin with. And I have members who've come to me and personally said, you know, hey, I don't know about, you know, showing up dressed a certain way. I don't know how people will feel if they find out this about me, or if I talk about this sort of topic. And I'm like, you know what? If they can't deal with it, we will discuss it like grown-ups, because that's what we are. And if we still can't come to some sort of happy medium, then we'll deal with that bridge when we get there. But for the most part, you know, fandom is a way to keep you sane. It shouldn't be a stress inducer. But no, that's a really interesting idea of that. I'm relatively new to Random Acts. I researched when, you know, Rhonda sent me the emails like, okay, well, who are these other people? So when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of know I've heard about this, but I didn't realize that we could, as a group, reach out to you guys for, you know, extra help or resources.
And
So that's interesting.
one of the messages, I was going to take a couple of questions from the audience, but one of the messages we had earlier sort of talks to all this. It says she was 10 years deep in the supernatural fandom, then found Gishways, which led to the Sid City Social Club. So it's amazing who you might know through fandom, even if you don't know that you know these people. There's always all these connections. And I love the idea of the sort of, it's becoming something much more normalized now. Anybody that knows me, I will happily go up to anyone and tell you that I'm all about fandom. But the first time we did that in the library to our library administration, we were like, we want to have a Comic-Con and we want to do this and that. And they're like, what's a Comic-Con? And we're like, okay, we'll start at the beginning. And they have been very obviously gracious. And they're like, yeah, sure. What, you know, we don't know what you're talking about. You go right ahead. And then sort of have learned about it over the years as we've done this. So, you know, even the library has become, we do a lot of geek programming now. We have a monthly Speak Geek where we just chat about various topics, and, you know, anybody's welcome. And, you know, back when we could do in person, we were doing, you know, we did a Yule Ball and you know, all sorts of stuff, Harry Potter or whatever. So it is slowly getting into everybody's consciousness, I think.
There's a couple things that I think are just inherently really healthy about fandom. One, I think we already have all accepted, anyone in fandom has accepted you're not going to be part of the status quo. Like, you are an outsider and that's okay. And so I feel like it becomes a very welcoming community, hopefully. I think there are negative aspects sometimes where that's not the case, but we fight against that, and hopefully, you know, that's not the dominant strain. But generally it tends to be very embracing of our differences, which I love. And then I also think the fact that it's like fandoms are based on a vivid imagination and the ability to think of better worlds and imagine better ways of being and new models of how societies can be and stuff that's inherent in the imagination that drives fandom. And so I think that that's really healthy. To me, that's been a natural progression to then work on models of how do we make the world better? How do we make the world kinder? How do we create a society where people feel more supported, where people aren't falling through the cracks, and feeling alone. And so to me, it is such a natural fit for this kind of work to be within the fandom realm. That makes
And
sense.
if you think of it like in terms of sort of narrative theory and narrative therapy, which says that like we all sort of construct our own life stories, and we often construct them by looking to other things for inspiration. And so many of the things that we fan are inspiring stories. I mean, you look at Supernatural, the theme of the entire show carried through the very end is always keep fighting. That is such an inspiring message. And it's a healthy thing for fans to take that message from that fictional story and incorporate it into their own life narrative. Like that's the way, when you talk about representation, that's why media is so important, because it does have the power to change real lives. So it's important what that media is, and it's a healthy thing that we take from it too.
Very much so. We're also not good at being told no. If somebody says you can't do something, we're like, watch me.
And there's the imagination that goes into the strategy of how. That's what I always love. And that's, to me, that is the conversation I love having every day with the staff, is like, okay, I know that doesn't seem possible right now, but how could it be possible? Like, let's figure out how we could do that.
Well, one thing I did with Random Acts, and actually one of your staff members was here, and there was just a call put out, we're going to do snacks and water for people standing in long lines voting, socially distanced snacking and stuff. And if anybody's free, meet here. And so I just happened to not be working that day and ended up having a wonderful time, because most people are like, oh, we'd like to do it, but how? You can't, and the thing. But we were like, no, keep it, making sure, and we were helping make sure the line, like, make sure you stay 6 feet apart, guys, and so there's a way to get a lot of things done, that it requires some, diagonal thinking to get.
That's exactly right. Which actually disabled people were really good at. It's we've got like a heightened, that part of our brain is heightened, because there's nothing I do that doesn't involve strategizing ahead of time. Like, okay, how do I get in that space and deal with this thing and whatever. So,
and why don't we make more use of that thinking?
Exactly. Great.
It's a talent. I mean, it really is a talent to be able to do that. A lot of people, and I'm one too, you get used to what you do, and then that's the only way you can think of to do it.
Right.
So we had one other question for Mel and Rachel. How does it differ interacting with and corralling a huge fandom versus a smaller fandom, and doing it like online versus in person? Rachel, just sort of more the random acts and the immediate of that versus, dealing with the entire Supernatural fandom, say, or Star Trek fandom. And
I don't find it that different, because for me, I think what gets me through everything is I love human connection. I think anyone who knows me gets that about me. I know Lynn, we've connected on that for a long time. So I don't really differentiate between big groups or small groups or whatever, because I want to connect with every individual in that group. So to me, like, the essence is always the same in that, and I guess that's part of how I handle and don't get overwhelmed and nervous or whatever. And I don't like dehumanization. So it's like, people think I'm nuts of like, I do one-on-ones with every one of the staff members. And they're like, no, executives don't do that, because they're saying, but to me, I can't think of the organization without thinking of the individuals that are part of that organization. And I feel the same way. Like when I do a big panel with hundreds of people, one of the things is that I focus in on each person that I'm talking to, and then want to engage and connect with them, and that keeps me from being overwhelmed of like, oh my gosh, there's a sea of people. So I don't, Mel, I'd be interested to hear your take, but that I don't really differentiate between those two.
Obviously we're doing slightly different things, but in my experience, I've run several different fan sites. My experience is almost all online, and they've ranged from hugely popular, 500,000 people a month coming through the site, to much smaller, much more niche fandoms. But like you said, Rachel, it really is about finding the individual within the group and then figuring out how to balance the needs and the wants of the individual in the group. You can't let any one person take over and redirect what you're doing, but at the same time, you need to listen and figure out, is this a real thing? Is this more than one person that's having this experience? Or even if it is just one person, is there something that we can do differently, do better to make their experience better? That's ultimately going to benefit the group, right? The entire fandom, or however much of the fandom is interacting with you. So I think it really is, it's scalable, and sometimes it can be overwhelming if there's a lot of people who are throwing stuff at you. And sometimes I've had experiences where a certain faction of a fandom decided that I was responsible for what they were seeing on their screens, even though I have negative control, like I have less than zero control over what's going on. But just because of the visibility of the platform that I had, I was getting a lot of really negative feedback that I had no control over. And in that case, you have to decide, I'm not listening to you. That's not,
Right.
This is not helpful. And then you focus on the other people who are having a positive, it's not that everybody has to agree all the time, but you do have to learn how to kind of cut off the negative and just let them go. Like, you feel free to go create your own space. That's fine. I am no longer listening to that. So, but for the most part, it is about finding the one-on-one connection and balancing that with the needs of the entire group.
Yeah, it's really good points. But it's interesting because I don't know if you found this, but working with people throughout the pandemic too, there is a similar thing in that it's very hard to build boundaries in your life when for a lot of the staff and stuff, is like, then there's family and there's this thing and there's people coming through, and then they go straight from their day job into a call for random acts, and it all just starts to bleed together. And so there's a similar kind of need to like step back and boundary build that there was in those big groups. It's just a different, it's coming from a very different, set of criteria.
Right.
But there's a similar thing, which is that to me, one of the joys and the important things of all of this is that the ability to just like I find it very, very important to take a breath, to step back wherever you are, whatever it is, to step back for a second, take a breath, and then like look at it anew and figure out where the boundaries need to be built in order for any of us to get through any of this.
And it's hard when you're doing something that you enjoy so much. You're like, well, but no, I can keep going. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you've run yourself down, and
It's true.
things are starting to suffer because you, as the leader, don't have anything left to give, and then you have to step back. So yeah, finding the boundaries is really important. I've been doing this for about 25 years now, so I've gotten better at it, but it's still a struggle. I think I've gotten better at recognizing, oh, I just went past the boundary. I need to come back. Not so much I'm approaching the boundary, time to step back, but more like, oh, there it went.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and self-care is such a big part of being okay these days. And anytime you have humans involved, there's going to be a negative element. Part of it is recognizing, some of it's unintentional. Like, I know I tend to get a little snippy before, normally I'm like mellow, but these days I'm a little more like, really? Before it. And I'm like, well, no, wait, maybe that person's just having a bad day. Maybe that person's just, had something bad happen. So, part of it is being more patient with people, but also more patient with yourself.
With ourselves. Yeah.
Yes, allowing yourself.
I think it made me think of, I think one of the most important things in any endeavor in life is grounded in the fact that we're all human and allow for that.
Yeah.
It's whenever we start to like dehumanize and other a person, it just goes downhill. And the same with us. And I sound like a broken record with the staff a lot of time on the importance of self-care, because we cannot be kind to each other and make it a safe space for each other if our batteries are out and we need recharging.
Yeah.
That's where things start to deteriorate. So it's just like that constant reminder of like, yeah, we're all humans, we all have needs, and let's try to fill those for each other.
I mean, talk about the things that we can learn from fandom. I feel like the whole world would be so different if everybody could just keep in mind that to look at each individual person instead of othering and grouping people together. And that's where stigma and prejudice and stereotypes come in. You know, if we could just maintain that focus on, oh, this is a human being in front of me, I feel like so much about this world would be so different.
I agree 1,000%.
I'm a firm believer that fandom will save the world.
Me too.
And
Me
fandom,
too.
and fandom includes, and that doesn't just limit it to, Supernatural or Star Trek or Firefly or something, but like, I mean, one of my main fandoms is Def Leppard, which is music. And people are like, oh, I never thought of that as a fandom. People that follow sports teams, people that follow, fandom can be anything that builds a community that tries to help each other and, enjoys stuff together.
It's sports fans were the original cosplayers,
Exactly. Precisely.
They still are. I live in Philadelphia. There's a lot of people walking around when it's Eagle season, let me tell you.
Yeah. And all this, actually, we had another question that kind of encompasses a little bit of this. It just says, how do you explain or understand the shift between when people gather to discuss a shared interest or TV show or actor, as to when the fandom evolves to become more of a community that's about more than just the show?
I think that's an evolution that always happens. I mean, that when people come together, sort of group dynamics kind of take over. And as soon as people come together, it's that shared thing that brings them together. But then basic group dynamics takes over. We want to have that sense of belonging with other people. It is, back in the day, a long, long time ago, if you didn't belong to a group, you were literally dead. Like it was survival. So we have this deep need to feel that sense of belonging. And so whenever a group comes together, those same dynamics kind of kick in. And for the most part, as we've touched on, not 100%, because group dynamics also includes things like hierarchy and competition and things like that. But for the most part, a lot of those dynamics are really positive. And you do see them play out the same way in any kind of fandom, media fandom and music fandom and sports fandom. It all plays out in much the same way.
I think it's important for the leaders of however hierarchical or organized a particular fandom group is. I think it is really important for the leaders of that group to guide how that evolution progresses. I mean, the group needs to lead to a certain extent, but if you have, I've seen many fandoms just fall apart, and there's all kinds of hard feelings and infighting, and because it usually boils down to ego. Somebody wanted to hold on to whatever big name fan status they had, rather than saying, okay, this is about the group and how can we make the world a better place? Yeah. And so I think organizations like Random Acts are really helpful in that as a model to say, you can look, we've got, as Rachel was saying, we have resources available to help you with that. And if people can kind of shift their thinking a little bit and say, yes, we came together because we share this interest in this pop culture, whatever it is. But now look at us, we have a group, we can do something, we can make a difference.
And it's, it's ever changing, like these dynamics. It's not like you can then just like you set it up and then you rest on your laurels and everything's going to go well. It's, I mean, I find it's like, it's a daily exercise, and this started to like trend in that direction, and we need to exactly what kind of plans do we put in place to help change systemically so that doesn't occur. But I do think there are certain ways to constantly undermine the more negative aspects of society, of the of communities, And a lot of it has to do with empowering each other. And one of the things I love with Random Acts is it's really about empowering others to be able to do the helping. And that's such a powerful feeling when we're able to, we feel useful and able to help each other and of purpose.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I love about the narrative is it's constantly, it's never like, oh, there is this one charitable person and let's all like bow to them. And aren't they wonderful? It's like, no, you can do this. It's really easy. Here's how easy it is to get involved. And I think that in any group, that's one of the best ways to kind of undermine that hierarchical thing is if everyone has the power to be able to do these things that we think are important, then there is no hierarchy.
And one aspect that I just wanted to bring up real quick, and Gish plays to this very well because this whole thing is being weird to do good. I personally feel that a smile or a laugh is one of the most healing things that can happen. And I found that fandoms, maybe because they're more open to sort of fantastical ideas, are so great at embracing the absurd and laughing at things that aspect of it is one of my favorite things. I'll watch a panel or something and I'll be in my room watching and I'll be laughing my head off and my husband's like, what are you doing? You know? So I personally just appreciate a lot of the time, you know, like watching with the Sid City or with, you know, Random Acts or Supernatural or, you know, whatever, and just interacting with other fans, just the joy it can bring.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's interesting, Mel, you know, in the work you're doing, and then I know, Lynn, you've experienced this too, is like, to me, one of the most interesting things about fandom too is taking away that thing of the actors or, you know, creators of the show being separate and on a pedestal and making it more, because I know I've talked about in like almost every panel of, if we're all drawn to this and we're all aesthetic, we find this to be a pleasing aesthetic and we're interested in this world, there's no, like, it's not that there's one person has the right to create this and other people who follow that. It's like, no, we're all drawn to creating this, and we all, like, my favorite question when fans ask me questions about a character, I'm like, what do you think? You probably you have equal amounts invested in this story. And to change up that dynamic, I think I would assume that's so much of what you're doing as well. And then humanize, because I think it is also dangerous, because as an actor, I find it precarious to be put in that position where you're on a pedestal, because it also, I can't live up to that. Yeah. That's a lot of pressure, and I'm never going to be that like otherworldly deity that you know I'm expected to be. That's I'm human. And I think that keeping that narrative as part of things is really important too.
That's been one of the really wonderful outcomes of doing the social club, is that Sid has been so much more accessible. He works a lot, and so he's not able to do the fan conventions as much as he would like. And even then, there's pressure to, you know, keep the line moving, keep the line moving. His is always the slowest.
Same. I'm the worst.
That is true, Rachel. Your line is the slowest.
But in this case, you know, I said before, we limit the Zoom meetings to 100 people, and that's intentional because he wanted it to feel more intimate. And he really, the format that we chose allows him to spend 15 or 20 minutes talking to a few people during each meeting. They're 2 hours long, so we get to, you know, 6 or 7 people. Sometimes he keeps going, and I'm over here going until he finally cuts it off. Yeah. Stop asking questions. But I think that has really humanized. I've seen the way that people talk about him change as they've gotten to know him more as Sid the person versus Alexander Siddig the actor. And that's been a lot of fun, because I've known him for such a long time, and I think he's one of my absolute favorite people, whether he's on my TV screen or not, or on my, you know, at the movie theater. He's one of my all-time favorite people. He's an incredible person, and now so many other people have been able to connect, and we have people who come over and over and over. You know, just drop in when they get a minute, when they have, you know, their schedule allows, or well, I don't know that we ever have anybody who only comes one time. They always end up coming back. But you know, you get to know him in a more real way. And then the fact that he is so curious about every person that he talks to
Right.
has been really empowering for, I've seen that also, how people have changed over the last almost year that we've been doing this. So it's a very, very cool outcome.
And I think too, like speaking to the humanizing side of things, a lot of fandoms where the object of fandom of whatever style sort of becomes more human, like being able, the other people in the fandom to say, thank you, you know, you're a normal person. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making this thing I love. Thank you for, you know, I really enjoy it. And the fans get such a boost out of being able to say, hey, I love this. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is what it meant to me. This is how it influenced my life. This is how, you know, we've had so many people come on and say, I'm now a doctor because of Dr. Bashir, or, you know, I embraced Bashir. If you're not familiar with this character, he's neurodivergent. And that's been a theme from the start of doing this, is people just coming on and saying, thank you, you made me feel more normal. And then the representation angle, because his father was Sudanese and his mother was English, so he's mixed race and mixed ethnicity. And seeing a brown person in a lead character on a sci-fi show has just, I mean, we've had grown men move to tears talking to him about this, and it's just been amazing to watch.
That's what I've heard people say in the books that are purposely written by both the actors and the fans. It's so interesting because there will be a chapter by an actor talking about how being on the show and interacting with the fandom has influenced them. And then 2 chapters later, there's a chapter from a fan, you know, like Shoshana has a chapter in the newest book. And then 3 chapters later, there's somebody writing about how Shoshana's character on Supernatural like changed her life. So that sort of reciprocal relationship becomes so clear when you're hearing the voices of all the people. I think it's really powerful.
And I would love all fandom to walk away knowing it's like that they are as much creatively a part of any of these stories as anything, that like to the same extent as an actor or whatever, we're imbuing those characters and living as those characters, you're imbuing it. It's any work of art is owned to the degree that the person viewing it is interpreting it and making it their own and making it what they want it to be. And I think everyone has a right to their imagination too. It's where I do, you know, I'm pretty outspoken that I don't believe in shipping wars and things like that, because I'm like, everyone has a right to their imagination, and please, like, there's no limit. All of those ships can be real because it's in your imagination and you can love them. So I think that it's super important that we validate that aspect, that creative aspect of every human being, is that they are making it something that is unique to them. The way they see it and interpret it and apply it to their lives is a creative act in itself.
Every single time you say that at a convention, Rachel, I tweet it because it's such an important message. Like, this is fiction, this is fantasy. Let people have whatever, ship whatever you want, have your own headcanon. It's all good. Every time you say that, I'm like, I'm going to tweet that.
Because it is so fundamental as humans, we have to have the right to our own imagination. That is what makes this world so magical to me, is that we all are bringing that to this shared, you know, world, but we're all bringing our unique, full imagination to it. And then we can like mix and match and figure out how to create social structures out of that.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And we're at the end of our hour. I could keep y'all here talking all day because basically you just validate everything that I'm it's just lovely to have. I want to say thank you so much for being here. I know you are all very busy with all your various projects, so thank you for giving us your time and your attention. And I think the main thing that we can take away from this is that fandom can save the world.
Yes.
So, so thank you very much for being here. And
it was so great to meet those of you that.
Yes, thank you.
Nice to meet everybody and see everyone.
Hopefully we'll see each other again in person someday, but until then, take care of yourselves, and everybody watching, please take care of yourselves. And thank you for coming. and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.